One of the prime lenses that I bought from the mid to late 2000s is the Nikkor 85mm f1.4D. This is an old design from 1995, and I liked it so much that when I switched from Nikon to Sony back in 2019, I bought another 85mm prime lens, and this time it's the Sigma Art lens. Sigma since has a newer design that they replaced this with that's smaller and still opens up to f1.4. But I still really like this Bigma 85mm f1.4 since it really works pretty well, even to this day. This video is not sponsored. Hunt's Photo and Video hosted a free event with performance from Cirque du Soleil, which I'll use examples with later on. The thoughts in this video are of my own, and no companies had any say in the production of this video. When I first got started in photography as a hobby, about 20 years ago, coming up pretty soon, I was wondering what is the ultimate lens combination for a beginner, and not to really specialize in anything, just in general. And I thought, let's start with an ultra zoom lens and then pairing that up with a prime lens. And then for me personally, I decided to go with the Nikkor 18 to 200mm for the ultra zoom lens, and then the Nikkor 50mm 1.8D for the prime lens. And that has been pretty solid for a while. And then since then, I started to gain an appreciation of the benefits of having a prime lens. And eventually, after buying the Nikon 50mm, I got the Nikkor 85mm that I was talking about earlier. And of course, now that I've switched over to Sony, I got the Sony equivalent of that from the Sigma line. And then this is the Sigma 85-14 from the Art series. So both of these are pretty awesome. The amount of light that both of these lenses take in at f1.4 is amazing. And it does add a lot of value, especially if you have, let's say, only zoom lenses in your lens collection. And these will fit in pretty nicely, even though the focal lengths may overlap with existing zoom lenses. But these lenses are awesome. F1.8 is a relatively large aperture for a lens, but when you buy a lens that's capable of going to f1.4, f1.2, or even larger, you get even more light and shallower depth of field to work with. With some zoom lenses, particularly the variable aperture zoom lenses, going to 85mm or around that focal length will give you, let's say, an f4 or f5.6. In the world of photography, that is a huge difference in terms of the loss of light and also the depth of field that you're working with. The difference between, for example, f1.4 and f4.0 is 3 stops. In other words, 3 whole stops is an equivalent of a brightness difference by a factor of 8. Oh, and the 85mm focal length will not distort faces, unlike some wide-angle lenses, especially the super wide lenses. That's not to say that the 85mm is the only lens that you can use for portrait photography. You have 135, some people like the 70 to 200. There are other combinations to choose from. Personally, I love the 85s because it gives you flexibility in terms of the aperture, and also it's a good balance, at least in my opinion, of the working distance between the photographer and subject. You don't have to be too close, and unlike the telephoto lenses, you don't have to be too far. While I plan to use the 85 for mainly portraits, you can use this for other types of photography as well. For example, I always thought landscape photography requires a super wide lens, but some people actually use a medium telephoto or a telephoto lens to compose some shots where you can add some compression to your composition. I recently went to Hunt's Photo and Video, and they had a fire juggling event performed by Cirque du Soleil, and they had some pretty cool tricks. For the fire juggling event, I ended up sticking with the 85mm lens because A, it was getting pretty dark out with the sun setting, and then B, they also asked us to stand behind a roped off area for safety reasons so you can't really get close up to the performers. I played around with my ISO settings as the various shots were taken, but I kept my aperture settings at f1.4 to take full advantage of the lens light gathering ability. I also wanted to freeze the action, so I had to keep my shutter speed up, which is in itself a challenge when there's low amounts of light. The fire would vary in brightness, which was probably the main challenge here because depending on that fire intensity, that could easily lead to the highlights blowing out in my shots, especially for those big flame tricks. Overall, I had a lot of fun here and it was pretty cool to see the performers do the various tricks. Oh, and for this one, the guy in front did set his tongue on fire. Pretty wild. So we talked about why I love using the 85s, the benefits of using them, and also seeing some examples of images being captured by a lens like this. But what are some of the drawbacks of using a lens like the 85? Well, I have a few reasons, but some of these aren't unique to this lens, and I'll explain in a couple of moments. First off, this lens does not zoom. All prime lenses do not zoom. It's actually the opposite of a zoom lens. So whatever focal length that you select, that's the one you'll get until you swap out the lens. So if you got the 85, you're stuck with the 85 until you swap it out with a different lens. And if you need that flexibility, you should probably go with a zoom. But if you're able to work with a single focal length at a time, these can be very beneficial as we talked about before. Second reason, at f1.4, you might get some chromatic aberration. And again, this is not unique to just this lens. The lenses that have very large apertures might suffer from this, where you have some lateral chromatic aberration where the different colors may not land in the same spot on your image. So if you have some green or magenta kind of shifted over in like high contrast areas of your photo, you might get some artifacts like that in your images just because of the properties of the lenses, and those could be corrected. There's also longitudinal chromatic aberration, which you have a misfocus of certain colors. But all in all, those kind of things are relatively minor when considering using a lens like this. And again, it's not unique to this specific lens. The third reason, however, is for this specific lens. So this is the original Sigma lens. This is the 85 art lens for the Sony E-mount, but it was adapted from the DSLR days. So some people say that this is just a built-in adapter for mirrorless lenses. So as you can see, this is much bigger than the original 85. Both of these, by the way, are full frame lenses. They're not APS-C lenses, so you can use these with full frame bodies. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of a difference. And actually, I don't have the lens hood for the original 85 handy somewhere in my closet. But you know, even without the lens hood, the Sigma lens is pretty big. Now they do have the DN version of this lens, which replaces this. Still 85 millimeters, still f1.4, but it's smaller and lighter weight. And those are the reasons why I love the 85 millimeter lenses. Do you have a favorite portrait lens? Let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. That's all I got for today. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.